This podcast is made possible by listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's February 21st, 2025. On this day, in 1825, the Cherokee Phoenix published its first issue. The Phoenix was the first newspaper created by and for a Native American nation, and it is still in publication today. The Phoenix used the writing system developed by Sequoyah, a Cherokee man from what we now call Monroe County in East Tennessee. During the Revolutionary War and the expansion of white settlement into what had been Cherokee territory, Sequoyah saw firsthand the power of written information and the advantage that came from being able to communicate complex ideas over long distances. He worked for years to hone a set of 86 characters representing the vowel and consonant sounds of the Cherokee language. But once he was done, it only took months for lessons in the writing system to spread throughout the Cherokee Nation. Thousands quickly became literate. The Phoenix began publication just 4 years after those lessons began. And the journalism provided by the Phoenix could not have come at a more crucial time. With the appetite for native lands in the Southeast growing more and more intense, the United States government, quite frankly, benefited when Native peoples were left in the dark. But as all kinds of things were happening that affected them, the Phoenix helped keep Cherokee people across the Southeast well-informed and less susceptible to attempts to coerce or divide them. Chief John Ross published editorials in the Phoenix warning of the Indian Removal Act and telling people in other parts of the nation about the way that settlers in Georgia were encroaching on their lands and harassing Cherokee people there. When the Supreme Court issued rulings that affected the Cherokee Nation, writers for the Phoenix dissected the judicial decisions and helped explain what was going on to the people most affected by those rulings. The people who wanted their land really did not like the newspaper. In the early 1830s, members of the Georgia Guard burned the paper's printing press to stop its operation. And within a few years, the Trail of Tears happened. But those Native journalists were able to regroup after their forced move to Oklahoma. In 1844, they resumed operation under a new name, the Cherokee Advocate. That publication stopped and started through the years, but the appetite for a news source devoted to the needs of Cherokee people never went away. In 2000, the Advocate reverted to the original newspaper's name, and today it is still a physical newspaper, plus a website and a strong social media presence that continues that work of keeping the Cherokee Nation informed about what's going on, not just on their reservations, but how federal happenings affect them. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. The saga of Sequoyah and the Cherokee Phoenix really highlights how important it is for a community to have its own local source of information. The specifics play out differently among different groups, but wherever you go, local journalism is essential for making sure people, any people, are able to truly understand what's coming their way from D.C. or how leaders closer to home are responding, or not, to the community's needs. One thing that I find really gratifying about working in the public radio system is the emphasis on local stations and the way news impacts people in their own communities and in their everyday lives. We at WPLN are invested in cultivating a deep understanding of the how and the why of what's going on right here, and helping all of us get to know our neighbors better with their concerns, their needs, their dreams, and keeping a close eye on what our state and local government is doing. We try very hard to make sure you have the information you need to make informed decisions about how you vote, where you spend your money, or what organizations get your time and energy. On a broader scale, our national network is bottom-up, not top-down. NPR is governed by representatives from local stations. The network amplifies what's happening in specific communities. Wherever possible, NPR airs stories reported by local folks who live and work in that place. Through the years, I've seen NPR invest time and money into helping train local journalists so that we can work at the highest level, whether we're filing a story for national or for local ears. And stations help each other, too. You've probably heard the recent uptick in stories from our partner stations in this region as we share coverage on things that affect not just Tennessee, but Kentucky or West Virginia, too. And we're talking to each other behind the scenes. We're sharing sound, information, whatever can help. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting plays a really important role in all of this. It bolsters local public radio stations around the nation. It's especially vital for stations in small towns and rural areas that don't have any other local news anymore. For us, it's a much smaller part of the budget, but we still get about $400,000 a year from the CPB, and we would definitely feel it if that money went away. That's not even getting into the role the CPB plays in the public television sphere. Mack, our VP of Programming, wrote about the threats to the CPB in yesterday's issue of the Nashville newsletter. I'm not going to repeat him point for point, but I will bring up one really important figure that he cites. Federal funding for the CPB costs you, as an individual, $1.60 a year. Just $1 and change. That's all. But it makes a tremendous difference to a heavily intertwined network of stations devoted to their local communities. Right now, with that funding in the crosshairs, if you believe in the importance of public media and local journalism, there is something you can do that won't cost you a dime. Go to the website protectpublicmedia.org to find out more about what's going on, and then reach out to the lawmakers to tell them that you are someone who values and relies on the programming that the CPB supports. In just a few minutes, Nashville's hip-hop scene levels up. That's coming up after the newscast.
Nashville Public Radio is always here to keep you informed, whether it's the latest news or music you should check out. Every week, What Where Wednesdays shares the latest happenings taking place right here in Nashville by talking to members of our community, putting on events in your neighborhood and beyond. So tune in to What Were Wednesdays every Wednesday, and you can always find events at WNXP.org/events.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. A Nashville-based Salvation Army unit is helping feed people affected by flooding in Kentucky. The mobile kitchen begins meal service today, providing hot meals to survivors and first responders assisting with the recovery efforts. Nashville's Metro Council is deciding on an overhaul to the police department's policy for using private companies' video footage. It's legislation that emerged in response to the council's rejection of Fusus, a police surveillance tool that allows MNPD to access footage from private business owners who've opted into the program. After significant community pushback, the council said no to a Fusus contract late last year. The city also paused current usage of the tool. Now, Metro's proposed legislation would enact guardrails for how the police are allowed to access such footage. Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell told our Daily Show that if it passes, he would likely bring back the Fusus contract for consideration.
If council gets to the end of those deliberations, agrees that those guardrails would be satisfactory, my hope would be that we could revisit the contract that would enable it, as well as restore some uses that MMPD had available to them already under other capabilities of Fusus.
The guardrail legislation has passed the first of 3 readings at the council. It was up for second consideration and debate earlier this week, but that was delayed until next month due to the weather. The Davidson County Criminal Court Clerk's Office has removed an access point that people could use to find key information about cases. Unlike many other courts, the county system does not put records like legal filings or judicial orders online. Instead, a set of computers at the courthouse were available for members of the public to access those materials. Now, those computers are gone. The clerk's office tells the Nashville Banner they made the change after realizing people could find protected personal information like Social Security numbers and the names of juveniles. An automatic redaction system installed a few years ago wasn't catching everything. Physical copies of public records are still available upon request, but that is a much slower process since it involves staff examining the records to redact sensitive information by hand. CoreCivic, a private company that runs 4 of Tennessee's prisons, made $2 billion in revenue last year. Correctional officials are asking lawmakers for more money on its behalf to help with inflation and employee retention. WPLN's Miriam reports they're likely to get it. But lawmakers are also looking to public prisons for a solution to chronic understaffing across the board.
Lawmakers could give CoreCivic an additional $7 million. That's a fraction of the more than $44 million the state has fined the company in the past 3 years for not meeting its contract, namely understaffing. House Majority Leader William Lamberth says that correctional officers are in high demand and low supply at all of the state's prisons.
So what you don't want is an underfunded prison.
Lamberth said the creation of a new public prison would help.
Prisons are not built now the way they were 40 years ago, and they're built with the understanding that you're going to have a lot of programs within those prison walls. That's a good thing to make sure those folks don't get out and reoffend.
CoreCivic is a big contributor to Republican campaigns and was one of Governor Bill Lee's top donors. Mariana Bacallao, WPLN News.
Prisoners in Tennessee will soon be able to receive free books again. Last year, the Tennessee Department of Correction, or TDOC, made it impossible for Books to Prisons nonprofits to mail books to prisoners in Tennessee. Now, one Books to Prisons program says it's worked out a system with the Corrections Department that will allow it to resume sending books. WPLN's Chard Aston has this update.
WPLN first reported on the restriction in January. Lydia Welker helps lead the West Virginia-based Appalachian Prison Book Project, which serves Tennessee. She says shortly after WPLN's reporting came out, she heard from lots of people who were outraged and wanted to help.
We had people reach out from all across the state of Tennessee and our region and the country.
Then she got an email from a senior TDOC official who expressed the same feeling.
So she had no idea about this policy change or inability to send books, and as a reader herself, she was appalled.
Sending books directly to prisoners is no longer allowed. So the workaround is Books to Prisons programs will now send books to a designated staff member at each prison. That staffer will then distribute books to the prisoners who asked for them.
We're going to start mailing to one state prison in the next couple of weeks as our first kind of trial run, see how that works out.
Brian Hurst, who's incarcerated at Turney Industrial Complex, says he appreciates the change, but is skeptical about whether books will actually reach prisoners. He wrote, "I think the workaround will have little to no effect on the majority of incarcerated readers unless TDOC posts notices informing them of the change statewide. For now, Appalachian Prison Book Program will work through a backlog of requests from the past several months it's been unable to fulfill." Chard Aston, WPLN News.
Another Books to Prisons nonprofit, the Massachusetts-based Prison Book Program, will also try sending books to Tennessee prisoners again using this new system. A cigarette tax that helps fund Tennessee trauma centers isn't generating as much revenue as it used to. The state's cigarette tax has helped offset some of the costs for the state's 14 trauma centers since 2007. At that time, the tax generated around $9 million, but due to falling cigarette sales, that number fell to below $6 million by 2023. WKRN reports this week representatives for trauma centers asked state lawmakers for additional funding to help cover that gap because they're treating more patients than ever. The first woman who ran for mayor in Nashville has died. Barbara Curlin was 95 years old. Barbara Curlin was an activist and volunteer, and in 1971 she entered the mayoral race because of a single issue: school desegregation. This was at a time when people were up in arms over federally mandated busing. Curlin used her platform as a candidate to speak in favor of Black and white children attending school together. She only got 4% of the vote, but a radio station did give her a midday call-in show called Viewpoint with a Liberal. Before she died, Curlin wrote her own obituary about her love for people, dogs, the arts, and her children. She suggested people slip it into library books instead of running it in the paper. But if you want to read it, it is on the Tennessean's website. She did not want a funeral. Instead, her loved ones are asking people to consider making charitable donations to groups that help unhoused people, or to any of the groups near and dear to her, including the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and the Nashville Ballet. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Nashville's had no shortage of underground hip-hop releases. Rapper Tim Gent and producer A.B. Eastwood have elevated the scene with years' worth of independent music. Recently, they reached a new milestone, putting out a single called MLB through a powerful national distributor. In this third story on building the city's hip-hop industry, senior music writer Julie Height sits down with Gent and Eastwood.
Tim Gent and A.B. Eastwood are long past the point of getting comfortable collaborating with each other. Here's Eastwood.
We're working together for 10 years.
If I could take the problem, wish them all away, I would make them do the Michael Jordan fall away.
We've also been like friends for 10 years too, so We were groomsmen in each other's wedding. So it's just a lot of trust.
That trust proved essential during their 4-year journey to positioning a little laid-back bop called MLB for national release. In the last 2 decades, Nashville hip-hop has rarely had the type of industry muscle behind it that this single has. And Eastwood knows it.
You can't play with things like this because they don't happen often.
But the track did originate back in 2022 with a game that he calls Beat Roulette. He had some musician friends over at his apartment, and they took turns throwing beats together within a time limit, just 20 minutes.
I don't know what it is.
Since he was just messing around, he doesn't remember the details.
I put in was this reverse thing. Man, I haven't unreversed it in so long. I'm so curious, like, what is it? Wow.
Turns out, Eastwood had reversed a drum kit groove. He sent Gent the instrumental, and late one night, the rapper sat in the kitchen listening. He started to weave melodic lines around the laid-back rhythm pattern.
Okay. Oh, we can keep it on a need and no basis, yeah. Spin it out the part and I'm running towards the bases, yeah.
When I said the first line, like, oh, we can keep it on a need and no basis, I was like, it'd be cool if I said basis again. And then I was like, oh, like basis, like swinging out the park. After that, it was subconscious almost how I continued to just write it.
Baby, let's make love, baby, let's make love, baby, MLB.
The baseball metaphor just kind of seeped in through wordplay, while Gent was tapping into his smooth R&B lover man side. He posted the demo on SoundCloud and didn't give it another thought until his friends started telling him they had it on repeat.
So I go on SoundCloud just to look. It had like 40,000 plays, and all I did was upload it.
The song was becoming a bit of a fan fave, but it wasn't done. It only had one verse, and he'd lost the original file when his hard drive crashed.
We tried to recut it, and it was sad. It was so sad attempting to recreate that moment. And then when we realized that that's a no-go, we put our scrubs on and we became doctors.
Eastwood had to use AI tools to strip the vocals from the uploaded demo, but Gent thought there was more they could do with the hook.
Just kind of do something musically that just kind of made it different or whatever, and he didn't really want to do it.
Make love, baby. Make love, baby, yeah.
The fact that Eastwood let himself be convinced to not only try Gent's idea, but elevate it further is a sign of the two friends' musical growth. They'd both signed publishing deals, and the more they collaborated with established pros, the more they expanded their skills and mindset. And MLB benefited, says Eastwood.
I was stubborn. Whatever beat I made was the beat. That was it. There wasn't many going back. And MLB is a Olympic gold medal for me of like, go back to the song, go back to the song.
He and Gent added a second verse, more ad-libs and synth pads, and Eastwood kept tweaking the mix until they had at least 15 versions. Gent performed MLB in his live sets, and the buzz around it grew to the point that the hashtag #FreeMLB appeared on social media.
My whole tenure being an artist, I've asked people to go listen, check something out. This is the first time that people are asking me for something and have been asking for going on 2 years now.
It was also the first time that his managers got interest from record labels. They turned down offers that weren't a good fit. Finally, last year, they signed a distribution deal with a new company called Gamma. It's got some pretty big names: Usher, Rick Ross, Snoop Dogg. And its founder, Larry Jackson, is a pretty big deal. He was the global head of Apple Music. Here's one of Gent's managers, Zach Cobb.
We have a similar mission. What we're trying to do is shed a light on black music here in Nashville. And he's ultimately trying to do that across the world, so much so that he was able to raise $1 billion into this company to support them.
Eastwood moved to L.A. last year, and he and Gent wrapped up MLB Long Distance. Dropping the song through Gamma is going to take the collaboration they began in Nashville even further.
It's exciting to know that this is going to be nationwide.
For Nashville Public Radio, I'm Julie Height.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter, too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. You can sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up next week.